Well, good morning, everyone. Everyone enjoy the keynotes this morning? Yeah? Show of hands, how many of you have been to a Couchbase Connect before? How many is this your first time? Wow, a lot of new people. Very cool. So we've got a really cool agenda for this morning and this afternoon throughout the day with this BizTech track. This track is all about kind of combining, the business benefits that customers are getting from Couchbase with the technology solutions and kind of how those come together. First up on deck is Konstantin from UPS. Konstantin is a industry IT veteran, decades of experience with databases, both in the relational world as well as the NoSQL side of the house. I kind of refer to Konstantin as a database badass. So he's going to present for the next half an hour, talk to you guys a little bit about what UPS is doing from a database management infrastructure perspective and some of the things that he's done to optimize the deployments of Couchbase at UPS. So welcome, Konstantin.
Thank you very much. Is this thing on? Yes, it is. First and foremost, logistics. We're all about logistics. We're UPS, right? So questions, hold them to the end. We have lots of content to cover. I just want to make sure that we get through it on time. That said, the slogan of this conference is "Revolutionaries Wanted." But for those of you in the room who are history buffs, like yours sincerely, it is obvious that finances and revolutions are very closely connected. Well, taxation without representation, that's American Revolution, right? Or the financial troubles of the Ancien regime that led to the French Revolution and Madame de Guillotine. No, we're not going that far. But connection between the revolution and finances is, of course, true for Couchbase. So let's take a look. Of course, everything starts with one's personal experience. So we'll take a look at the specific use case at UPS, what problems we faced, what our architecture choices we considered, then what do we consider as wins, and then what we would like Couchbase to do better. Finally, lessons learned. This is a recording of the demo. And before we begin, I'd like to assure you that all the data that you will see in this demo is fake. You will see no real customer data, neither shippers nor receivers, and that is because we treat privacy of our customers very seriously. So let's take a look what's going on here. So this is a tracking use case. These days, nobody is typing in tracking numbers anymore. Well, very few people do. Typically, people go either through notifications in their email or through applications like UPS My Choice, in this case, through a website. So when one does that, one is presented with a calendar of deliveries. In this case, you see one package to be delivered on Friday. We can expand that information and drill in further. If necessary, take actions such as change delivery or set up alerts, and dive down even further, going into full tracking details. This functionality is available, of course, through the browser, through the mobile device, and you can easily download UPS application and experiment with that at your leisure. As you will be doing this, you will be talking to the Couchbase behind the scenes. So, what's so special about it? What's difficult about this use case? What's the problem? Well, the problem, ladies and gentlemen, is volume and very rigorous quality of service requirements that are combined with that volume. We're talking about billions of packages. They are represented in Couchbase by billions of documents. Those documents are changed all the time. They're not static. And At the same time, we have tens of thousands of tracking requests per second as to interrogate this information, as to present our customers with the latest and the greatest. So, as it probably comes at no surprise to you, we've been doing tracking for a long time, long before Couchbase ever existed. So our first generation of tracking was a collection of relational databases. And let me tell you, all these diagrams that you will see here are extremely oversimplified. But just to convey the idea, when you see a database can here, that in fact in the back used to be a large collection of databases that were coalesced by the application as to produce the tracking results. This solution worked for many years. There was nothing wrong with it. It scaled. Everything was fantastic. But we wanted something that would be more responsive, more performant, more dynamic, more elastic, and it would cost us less. So our generation 2 of the solution was with experimenting with caching. Our first experiment with caching was write-aside cache. The data still resided in relational databases in the back, but we noticed that many a time the tracking response is repeated over and over and over again. So as to save the trip to the database the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth time, we persisted the response in a write-aside cache. Now that presented an improvement, but that write-aside cache was not persistent. And there are still quite a few requests going back to the traditional technology, to the relational databases. So generation 3, Couchbase comes front stage, and it plays two roles. First, it's the persistent cache, highly scalable. And it's important to note here that Couchbase is not the only database in this picture. As you can see, the PubSub to the left is actually writing to multiple data stores, and some of them are still relational data stores. Data sleeps there. It sleeps nicely, but the data plays in Couchbase. We've been talking about systems of engagement. This is where the engagement happens. Seems to be logical. There is the rub. The cost must give us pause. And for those of you who are Shakespeare purists in the room, do forgive me, because I just butchered to be or not to be monologue. So, what's the problem? The problem is the number of nodes. So what's driving the number of nodes? Turns out that the optimal size of a Couchbase node is not infinite. It is limited based on Couchbase behavior and best practices. Everything that you see on this slide is true about Couchbase 5.0. That's when we implemented this solution. The picture is changing in Couchbase 5.5, and we'll be talking about that as well. So, Couchbase is a highly available system. Maintenance operations are the blood of Couchbase, and one of the most important maintenance operations is rebalance. And rebalance behaves differently depending on memory residency. If 90% of all data resides in memory, then the data is streamed directly from the sending node to the receiving node, memory to memory, no I/O involved. However, If the memory residency is below 90%, then the data must be pre-staged first on the source node before it is sent to the target node. That process is referred to as backfills, and it's not at all dissimilar to the old concept in the relational databases referred to as prefetch. The major difference is that prefetch is used for read operations or write operations in the relational databases. In Couchbase, backfills are used for maintenance operations, in this case, rebalance. So backfills reads ahead data from persistent media, brings that data to memory, and then that data is sent from the memory of the sending node to the memory of the receiving node as to achieve the effect of rebalance. So, Couchbase engineering experimented quite a bit with these concepts, and we were advised that backfills are most stable when nodes have less than 2 terabytes of data, and when at least 15% of that data resides in memory. Then, while 15% of 2 terabytes is slightly over 300 gig, and the closest out-of-the-box common configuration to that is 256 gig of memory. So that becomes the ceiling of the node size in terms of RAM. Well, the smaller are your nodes, the more of them you need to fulfill your solution. That's what's driving the cost. And the cost is not just Couchbase licenses, it's also infrastructure, it's networking, and everything that's connected to it. And it doesn't end there. There's ripple effect of growing the number of nodes. The more nodes we have in a cluster, the more probability there is that they fail. Typically, it is considered that a cluster of 10 nodes or fewer can safely live with one replica. But once we go beyond 10 node cluster, then the probability that more than one node will fail at the same time is going up, and therefore a greater number of replicas are needed. Greater number of replicas need more RAM to house the data. Remember, we need to keep at least 15% memory residency, and we're limited by the amount of RAM that we have per node, so the count of nodes going up and up and up, and it's costing us more and more. Need to look for a solution. So where did we start? I have some colleagues here from UPS, and some of them are data modelers. And they tell me that the world would be a complete chaos if not for the data model. So that's where we started. We started looking at the data model and said to see what is there that can help us solve the situation. One thing that we noticed that not all data is made equal. Some data is used as search predicates. It must be indexed. But some data is just simply used as payload. So the logical question is, do we treat these two categories of data the same way? And we decided not to. We experimented with the idea of compression. So if we treat part of the data as payload, then we probably could compress that payload and save in the amount of data that we need to have per node, and therefore reduce the total number of nodes. So where did we start? If we did nothing, then per data center for this specific use case, we would have approximately 100 Couchbase nodes. We applied compression, and that helped us somewhat. But it didn't help us resolve the situation with keeping the cluster to 10 nodes or fewer. Remember the probability problem? That the more nodes you have, the more likely more than one node to fail, that the more replicas you have, and therefore more nodes you need to account for that situation. So another idea that we entertained was, well, what if we shard data across multiple clusters and manage that sharding in the application? Therefore, each individual cluster would be at 10 nodes or fewer, and therefore we only need one replica. So that helped us some more. What did we achieve? We went from roughly 100 nodes per cluster to approximately 20 nodes. And we spread those 20 nodes across multiple clusters. Through logical sharding, we designed our solution in such a way that we had more logical partitions, if you will, than we had clusters. Why? If we have natural growth or exponential growth due to functionality or greater customer engagement, then we can grow the number of nodes without increasing the number of nodes per cluster. We achieved other benefits by applying these two solutions, which is compression and partitioning or sharding. Maintenance became simpler. We could execute maintenance across multiple clusters at the same time. And there are some other benefits that you can see on this slide. So what does that mean? Mission accomplished. We went from 100 nodes to 20 nodes. That's per data center. XDCR would require more nodes in other data centers. But are we done? Is this the end of the journey? And we believe that we're not done. And we believe that Couchbase can help us make it better and can help you make better similar solutions in similar situations when you encounter them. So we asked Couchbase for a number of improvements. First is native in-memory compression. Up until Couchbase 5.0, Couchbase did use compression. It's snappy library, but only at the storage tier. Data was not compressed in memory. Data was not compressed on the wire. Data was not compressed in XDCR. So we asked Couchbase to reconsider and see if compression can be also applied in memory, on the wire, and XDCR. That actually has been done. So it's now available in Couchbase 5.5, again, using Snappy Library. I'd like to point out that Snappy Library is designed for fast compression, but the compression ratio is not going to be as effective as, for example, with gzip. So one needs to keep that in mind. And your mileage may vary, so you need to experiment and see what it means in your specific use case. The second improvement that we asked for was to help us manage sharding across multiple clusters. We wrote it ourselves, but we believe that SDK can handle it for us. So we submitted that requirement for Couchbase. By the way, all the links that you see here on the slides, like JDBC-1084, are live links that will lead you to the publicly available pages about these requirements. So Couchbase acknowledged this requirement, but there's now no date for a future release or no target at this point. We'll keep pushing. If you need this, help us push. Next one is increased node density. Remember, we started with the problem that if our memory residency is relatively low, then because of the backfills, the way they behave, we're basically limited to 256 gig of RAM per node. We'd like that behavior to be changed, but in order for it to change, the rebalance behavior needs to change. It needs to be redesigned. It needs to be improved. Something has to be done differently. And as you heard today, Ravi was talking about improving the performance of rebalance, and we're hoping to see traction for this requirement as well. However, it has not yet been targeted for a future release. Again, if you're interested in it, voice your opinion. Finally, let's just review what we learned in this journey. We learned that the quality of service requirements, rigor of quality of service requirements, and Couchbase-based practices may constrain the way we configure our nodes and our clusters. And that may lead to node sprawl. Then we control the node sprawl with experimenting with compression and experimenting with partitioning, with sharding. And it helped us solve our problems, and we hope that it may help us solve yours. And now it's time for questions. Questions? Yes, please.
How do you keep in sync the system of record and the system of
Okay, the question was, how do we keep in sync the system of record and system of engagement? It's a good question. The pub/sub platform, if you would, a service bus is responsible for that functionality, and the data that is being persisted in databases to, quote, sleep, perchance to dream, is used for long-term historical analysis, is used for various data transfers, et cetera, et cetera. So it's basically the service bus that is responsible for keeping information in sync. Further questions? Yes, please.
You mentioned something about the data model and importance of data model.
Here, let's use this one. Question.
You mentioned about data models and importance of data models, modelers' contribution to this design. I'd like to thank data modelers for this effort.
Shout out to all the data.
Excellent work.
Thank you.
So, my question is, how do you envision, keeping a data vault architecture in future? For example, there are a lot of touch points, right, in this engagement, things happening. in case of any audit or anything comes, how do you envision keeping a data vault architecture? So if somebody's asking, at some point, can you prove that this is what happened?
Okay, so it's an audit question. So incidentally, we also submitted very early on a number of requirements for audit. And as you know, that Couchbase introduced audit for nickel. We would like to see audit also for all other operations in Couchbase. Here, of course, the complexity is that part of the payload is compressed and therefore hidden from Couchbase. Couchbase treated as a key value pair. So other means would need to be used to provide traceability of this information. In our case, that compressed payload is still JSON, and it complies with our data modeling best practices. The metadata is known and persisted and is discoverable. So that is our path to regulatory compliance. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, please. Oh, right here, first row. I'm sorry.
Do that one first.
Okay.
We'll get you next.
Yeah, hi. I have a couple of questions. First is the encryption. So data at rest, in transit, as well as in memory, can it be encrypted, and have you implemented any kind of encryption on all these three layers? Second question is, if your data grows to approximately petabyte size, then resharding the entire data set, how easy it is, or have you tested any of those technologies?
Two good questions. So let me take the first one first. It was about encryption of data in motion. So we do encrypt data in motion. As you know, Couchbase supports, as of 5.5 TLS 1.3, I believe. So that provides not only encryption, but it provides defense from the man-in-the-middle attack and many other types of attacks that may be, of which a database may become a victim. So that's the answer to the first question. The second question is resharding. So remember, we introduced logical shards. So we have those logical shards are configurable. So we can, at will, move a logical shard from one cluster to another, or allocate a brand new cluster to house a specific shard or shards. So that movement would occur over time. It introduces complexity in the application, no doubt. The entire solution that we just described puts some burden on the application in terms of complexity. However, we reduced that complexity as much as we could by configurable sharding and by an ability to move logical shards from one cluster to another at will. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
I'm not looking for specifics, but your probability of failure of nodes, is that based on a standard that you guys have internally for hardware, or is that a general number based on all the platforms that you guys use?
Good question as well. So the question is about probability of node failure. Is that our own experience, or we have an external source of that information? It is indeed an external source of this information, and the source information is Couchbase engineering.
All right, so we have time for one more question, and then we'll kind of wrap this up. Obviously, very knowledgeable in the product and what you guys are doing. So, definitely connect with Konstantin, throughout the day. Just a wealth of knowledge. But we do have time for one more question. So we'll do it right here.
Have you done any total cost of ownership or total value of ownership of the product?
Have we? The question is, have we done the evaluation of total cost of ownership? Total cost of ownership is a loaded term, and it's very difficult to do because it's not only hardware, software, it's also labor, and it can get as complex as data center, floor space, et cetera, et cetera. It's extremely complex. Have we done it top to bottom for Couchbase? No. But what we did do, specifically for this initiative, we assessed Couchbase hardware and software cost and how it played into the business value that was created by the initiative. So there were some targets that we needed to meet, and we needed the cost to stay below a certain level to meet the business case. So this is how we approached it here. The total cost of ownership, the answer is no, but partial evaluation, including software and hardware, yes.
Can you share those results, or
I'm sorry, that's not public.
All right, very good. Thanks a lot, Konstantin. Let's have a big round of applause.